Good evening, everybody. Hey, thank you for coming out. There's a lot going on campus tonight, so we're excited that you took time to come out here tonight. We are professionally videoing this, so it will be published via the Mary Baldwin YouTube channel, so be on the lookout for that, okay? I'm going to do a brief intro, and then I'm going to cut the main forward lights off, so you'll see me kind of disappear and cut some lights off. I think I know most of you, but good evening. I'll tell you who I am. I am Jim Sconyers Jr. I am chair of the Department of Art and Art History and co-coordinator of the Susan Paul Firestone Lecture Series in Contemporary Art, along with my colleague, Martha Saunders. The series was initiated years ago through the generosity of Ray Graham III, and it honors the creative work and accomplishments of Dr. Susan Paul Firestone. So last year I focused on Mr. Graham, and I thought this might be a good year to focus on Susan. I didn't do that last year. So Susan grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and graduated from Ashley Hall and Mary Baldwin College in Stanton, Virginia, and it was in 1968. And she went to art schools, plural, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philly, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in Maine, and she earned a Master in Fine Arts from American University in D.C. in '72. She then received a Master's in Art Therapy from New York University in 2001, and continued training in that vein at the Institute of Polyanalytic Training and Research and Child and Adolescent Program, which laid the foundation for her work on post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma immediately after 9/11. She was downtown when that happened, 9/11, and she could see it from her apartment, which was, it's like the second story down there. And we had a chance to visit with her one year, and she described that experience and the compulsion to be a part of the healing process. So she worked for FEMA and the Red Cross in Lower Manhattan and mental health in a hospital, several schools, and community centers in the 10 years following the World Trade Center disaster. And in 2013, Susan completed a PhD in expressive therapies at Lesley University in Cambridge. Her dissertation, Art as a Catalyst for Resilience, Women Artists with a Life-Threatening Illness. It explored the creative process in relation to health and ill health. She is board certified, a board certified art therapist, licensed creative arts therapist, and a psychotherapist in private practice in New York City. So there you have it. Now you know, okay? Now to the show at hand. We are so excited and honored to have with us this evening the artist and filmmaker, Kevin Everson. And we have a tradition here where we like to select one of our students to introduce the artist. So Professor Saunders and I have selected this year MBU studio art major and film minor, Riley Gregg. Riley, come on up.
I wrote a speech because I don't like public speaking, so I knew that if I got up here, I would fail this. So, hi, I'm Riley. I'm a studio art major and film minor, and I would like to introduce artist and filmmaker Kevin Everson, who was born and raised in Mansfield, Ohio. He's received an MFA from the University of Ohio and a BFA from the University of Akron, and as a professor of art at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, that is where he resides full-time. Having made 8 feature-length films and over 120 short films, which include the award-winning Park Lanes, The Island of St. Matthews, Erie, Quality Control, Cinnamon, Spicebush, and one of my favorites, Century, his films and artwork have been displayed at multiple venues such as the Sundance Film Festival, the Berlin Film Festival, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., and many others. Everson has been globally recognized through multiple awards and fellowships, including the Alpert Award, the Creative Capital Award, Ohio Council Art Fellowships, an American Academy and Rome Prize, and I'm sure many more to come. So, on behalf of the Art and Film Departments in Mary Baldwin University, please welcome Kevin Everson.
Oh, I'm moved and flattered, and thanks for inviting me here. Oh man, this is pretty cool. I just got here, so I'm excited. But yeah, just like Riley said, name's Kevin Jerome Everson. I'm from Mansfield, Ohio, and then I'm going to talk about my, I guess my artistic practice and how the stuff I do. And then I'm from. I went to the University of Akron as an undergraduate and Ohio University as a grad student. And my degrees are in fine art photography, actually. So I'll talk about some of the still photography, the street photography like I was doing. And now I mostly do films and sculpture. So I'll talk about I have multiple bodies of work in film, so I'll talk about that. But anyway, so I like to start off with this little image here. That's me as a 5-year-old making an amazing Santa Claus. Which is superior to that wreath. But anyway, my aunt used to work at the Mansfield News Journal, the paper. So she used to get me and my brother and my cousins in these pictures and stuff. And this picture was published in it says December 1970, but in April 1971 was the Supreme Court busing ruling that just kind of came down, and these were happy integrated. Like integration pictures, because she wasn't in my class, because I went back and checked. So they're just putting black kid and a white kid together, and then of course I'm institutionalized by making a white Santa. But anyway, so it's kind of fascinating because my hometown is it's like 30% African American. I was telling folks earlier, I always I think it's a Malcolm X quote where the Mason-Dixon line is the Canadian border. So the whole idea of Mansfield is a very southern city because most of the African Americans are from Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and most of the whites are from Kentucky, so in West Virginia. So it's this kind of southern mix and in this kind of northern industrial town, so to speak. Yeah. So, but anyway, I want to talk about my influences first, and then talk about some kind of body of work. Can I move here? Or can I do it? Because I like to kind of, I have a dance. But anyway, so the picture on your left is that's my cousin Bobby Clark, and I remember my uncle. I remember being at my brother's graduation, and my Uncle Wanky taking pictures of my brother and stuff, and then he made a diagonal of this Instamatic Kodak camera, and then he announced that he was making art. And then I thought that was kind of interesting. I was 14, 16 at the time. So the fact that, I always thought that you have to announce that you're making art somehow or another, and you have to do these kind of gestures. And for me, what he was doing was he was creating this the strong diagonal line, which is, is the line indicates movement. So the whole idea of making art. And then the person on the right is a Peoria, Illinois native, Richard Pryor, who was probably one of the top 10 artists this country's ever produced. And then it was interesting because my mom was a bank teller, my dad was an auto mechanic, and so the whole idea and then I started to realize what was the art objects in my hometown, and it was actually blue comics. We said they used to play Red Fox on blue. For those of you young, a blue comic is a dirty comedian. I forgot why it was called blue. Anybody? Blue? White collar, blue collar? No, blue was something dirty. You would say, yeah, it was white. Yeah, it was blue was. I forgot. I remember seeing it one time. Yeah, yeah, blue movies. It was always something there was something dirty. But I liked But it's funny. But my parents never censored it. We'd be 11 or 9 or 5 hearing Richard Pryor cussing and stuff like that. But I like him as an artist and stuff. He's a great character. And one of my favorite pieces of art is this thing called Hank's Place, which is like it's a 10-minute audio piece where he imitates a character. They say, 'cause like his grandmother ran a brothel and a dice house, so he'd imitate characters that in there. So it's a 10-minute skit, and then you can see it on, hear it on YouTube or something like that. But anyway, it's kind of a dirty joke, but I like how he would describe things and give the minor character. So he has a joke about dating and sexuality, and he talks about cunnilingus, and then he has this thing where he says his uncle said, "Boy, whatever you do, don't do that." And he says he couldn't wait to do that, and then he'd go in about dating, so to speak. But I like how it would. Then he would say that his uncle's been wrong about everything in his life, so he's wrong about that. So I like that one-word description narrative of a person. And then, so in my films and stuff, I always like that kind of one word, like that one kind of sentence with description of a character within the narrative structure, so to speak. Yeah, Richard Pryor. And then another Illinois artist, Chicago native, with Lorena Hansberry, and her famous play as like Though Raised in the Sun. And then I saw the film, the Auto Premature film, before I saw the play. And then I liked how she would how she write characters and stuff. It was like almost like a kind of a kitchen room, bedroom, or like living room drama. And I like how you'd be happy one minute, sad the next, happy one minute, sad the next. And then I like that kind of tenor. I like the, like an artist achieving those kind of frequencies, so to speak. So she's a big influence on me. These other two artists, Bootsy Collins on the left from Cincinnati, Ohio, and George Clinton on the right from Plainfield, New Jersey. And I don't know if some of you guys are young, but George Clinton has this group called Parliament Funkadelic. That's all I listened to in the 70s, whatever. My brother had a more wide range of music. I was just a kind of a funk guy, soul boy and a funk guy. But anyway, so I liked how the Funkadelic albums and the Parliament Funkadelic albums, they each, the Funkadelic album came out in the summer, the Parliament album came out in maybe December, but it had this kind of imaginative, like the underwater segments, the space segments. So the whole idea, I know a lot of people kind of grab this stuff for Afrofuturism, but at the time it gave us a kind of a sense of imagination, like the power of imagination. And then also, George Clinton's got this great line about the moon. I'm going to talk about the moon in a second. And he says, we were already up there and we was waiting on y'all. So I kind of like that. So these two artists had this super imagination, these kind of albums, so to speak, that would kind of transport me and stuff. And I wanted to kind of do that with the kind of films and stuff I wanted to do as well. This is another set of artists, Fischl and Weiss. This piece was at the Wexner Art Center, and what they do is that, among other things, they have this huge practice, and what they do is they make things that look like things. These are polyurethane sculptures. So what you basically go up behind the stairs, and you see this room, and this is as far as you would get, and then you'd peek in this room, and then so they would make these kind of objects that supported the gallery system, like ladders, paint, stuff like that. And then I like how these things kind of play with narrative, so to speak. So even this particular gesture here, by having these objects painted green up to here, and this object painted green up to here, so it has a sense of narrative, so to speak, the sense of backstory, so to speak. And I like, again, the small gestures to create kind of backstory and to create kind of narrative. So let's speak as kind of, things that I kind of would react to. And I don't know if anybody's from Detroit. Anybody from Detroit? Is anybody from Ohio? Oh. From what part?
I was born in Columbus. I live in Cleveland, but most of my family is in Chicago.
Oh, wow. All up and down I-71. All right. Every day. I know. So it's good to have an Ohio in there. I don't know. I think it's good. I don't know. Ohio's I always think Ohio's the third worst state in the union, out like Missouri and New Jersey. Yeah, it does.
When you go to break, I'm like, Ohio, where?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, but so anybody from Detroit, but this is like a kind of an outdoor sculpture. This guy, what the Davos has this kind of, I've seen this some areas where you see that people paint houses and this kind of outdoor sculpture. I took this photograph, and so it's basically this kind of big outdoor, like a block long kind of artistic like expression. And I intentionally came around here and took this image, and it's basically iron showing a rock how to rust. But I like this, like just like I stood here and made this particular image because I like how the paint cans and the stumps are formally the same and conceptually the same, but kind of different. And then when I saw this, it kind of reminded me of an aggressive edit. It just when you're making films and you take two shots together, and then what they do is they arise and make something else. So I kind of like, so I'll show you clips of films that have this kind of conceptual kind of edit to it, so to speak. And so I like how these kind of things are formally kind of the same, but kind of different. What materials, but they kind of blend together, so to speak. Yeah. Oh God, I got a lot of explanation. So that's me. So this picture was taken about 10 years ago, and I remember, and then again I'm from Mansfield, Ohio, and I remember, and I left there just when I was 18. I went to college and stuff, but I still have friends and family still there, and my son's mom is still there, and I remember just when I go home, people think that I've never left. So I would get in a conversation with somebody and say, hey, Kevin, do you remember Pooh Black? I was like, nope, I don't remember Pooh Black. Well, Pooh Black did this. I was like, I don't remember Pooh Black. Well, anyway, Pooh Black did this. I was like, I don't remember Pooh Black. And then so just basically go on to Act 2, and they tell me what Pooh Black had did, so to speak. And so if anybody kind of making kind of narrative film, so, so it's a 3-act play. The first act is a setup. The beginning of the second act is when the character's thrown into chaos, and then the third act is the resolution. And so what I do, so I actually do this, like in my work, like I don't, like I skip the first act. So it was interesting how, I remember years ago, I was thinking, well, I do this, whatever, like formally in my work. So in my films, like they start right when the second act is, so I completely skip the setup. Like I think the setup is a waste of time. I don't know. So just kind of go into it. So formally, so with my upbringing, like I think, I don't know if this is something that it's in my DNA or something like that, but it's something that I formally do, whatever. Like my films begin in the middle and end before, and then end before it ends, so to speak. So you get this kind of abstract, this kind of snippet of kind of life, so to speak, whatever. Yeah. Talk about a little, like I said, my degrees are in fine art, photography. So after I got out of college and stuff, I do all kinds of stuff. I do sculpture, I did painting, printmaking, artist books, and some film. And, but my main body of work in the kind of 90s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s was street photography, like in the genre of like Roy DeCarva, Robert Frank, Diane Arbus. But I use this particular camera called a Wide Lux. It's a Japanese brand like camera, and what it does, it takes 35 millimeter film. Instead of 36 exposures, it has 21 exposures. And what it does is that the lens moves. So it has like 3 shutter speeds. So when you click the shutter, the lens moves around the frame, so to speak. So it creates this effect. So it creates this kind of panoramic effect, where this event here always occurs before the event over here, because the lens moves around the frame. So I like that as a kind of art is a kind of a verb in a weird way. So it's always like it's constantly moving. And so what I was looking for, just when I was taking these photographs, was people of African descent either posing or performing with objects that I would consider art or representational, so to speak. So I felt privileged that I was making art just by clicking the shutter. So within the frame, there's always somebody within the potentiality of kind of making art, so to speak. So here, this person has a camera, these kind of homemade signs, and then so I'm always, and then the camera, anybody knows cameras, like it has a kind of a, I think a 17 millimeter lens, so to speak, so super wide. So I could probably touch, if I was taking this picture, I could probably touch her shoulder, you know, so to speak. And then every now and then I do that, kind of touch her shoulder, so I can get people to kind of look at me or look away, so to speak. So I'd be composing the image, but also trying to like, but also I kind of structure it by the way I was standing, so to speak, whatever, yeah. Yeah, and then Columbia, South Carolina. So I was sitting on the porch and I saw this kid carrying a drum, so to speak. So there's always these kind of objects of you know, like kind of art objects that would be in the image. This is the city council meeting, or the orator. And then the camera had 3 shutter speeds, 250th of a second, 1/25th of a second, and 15th of a second for interiors. So here's why you see this kind of blur, so to speak, because it was like kind of slow shutter speed. And then so kind of at the end, I was kind of fragmenting, you know, like the whole idea of mixtapes and, you know, being creative, so to speak. And so, but at the end, I was kind of fragmenting bodies, so to speak, you know, kind of playing with the edges of the frame, so to speak. Yeah. And then also, I always had this kind of like multiple, those of you who are students or maybe getting up to go to grad school or want to make art, I think when I was in school, I was trying to, like I didn't really know what I was going to do. And art's expensive, I ain't gonna lie. I mean, a tube of cobalt blue will cost you like $125. You know, and even like film and photography and, you know, it just building frames. I mean, it's just super expensive, so to speak. So when I was in school, I was like trying to learn multiple disciplines and using multiple materials so I can always produce something. So if I was broke one month, I could do like artist books. If I had money, I could do the frame, you know. So like in my sketchbook, I would have multiple drawings of the same concept. So if I was making, you know, because wherever the concept was, I would have drawings for that particular concept in photography, sculpture, and even films, even before I was kind of making films. You know, artist books, so to speak. So I was always going to make sure I was going to be productive, so to speak. And in this particular body of work, I was making kind of furniture at the time because I had space and stuff and a little space and stuff. And so I was making all these kind of multiple things. I think it's because I lived in this kind of factory town, so I'd make like 12 end tables. But this particular body of work was based on how the so-called art object was presented in the African-American home. So like, you know, folks would put their photographs on end tables, put their photographs on walls. So I was kind of making these things to put the photograph on, you know, so to speak. And all the furniture was made like what my parents had, like kind of Dutch mid-century kind of modernism or something like that. But these things are called Mansfield Ohio end tables because, like again from Mansfield, Ohio. And Mansfield, when I was young, during the second black migration after World War II, there was more jobs than people. It was a factory town. There was a General Motors plant there. I worked at Westinghouse for a summer. There was car part factories. There was a tap-in. There was a Mansfield Tire. There was all these kind of jobs, whatever. And then those things started to dry up when I got out of school in the 80s. And then and then there's always been this thing in my hometown called the Ohio State Reformatory, the prison there. And now it's a film set. Anybody see Judah and the Black Messiah? Yeah, so the prison scene was shot there. Has anybody seen one of my favorite films, which is watchable, Air Force One? You ever see that with Harrison Ford kind of running around there and shit? It's pretty, yeah. Well, the Soviet Gulag is my hometown, yeah. So and then there's a bunch of Sly Stone films. He's always breaking out of jail and shit. The famous film, Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, like that's all shot in my hometown. And they have Shawshank Redemption tours and stuff. But now the prison is a film set. You use a film set. But it's the highest cell block on planet Earth. It's 6 stories high. And then in 90 they closed it But they built 2 other prisons, like, of course. And all my friends I went to high school and stuff, they all work in the prison. So now that's the main employee there in my hometown with the prison. So like it's a catch-22 or 23, whatever, I don't know. Is that more crime in the state of Ohio, the more people with jobs. That's like that in most municipalities. So I think there's a federal prison around here, right? Is there one around here? I don't think it's closest. Is that where Martha Stewart was? I think she was in jail here. Yeah, wasn't she in jail? Oh, it was West Virginia? Oh, okay. Do people visit her? I don't know. Just get some cooking or something. I don't know. But anyway, so I started making these these end tables had to be about Mansfield. So the photographs are friends of mine who work at the prison, who are going to work, or in the prison. And then the other images are from my parents with the yearbook from school day, like images from the 50s. So the work was kind of about black migration. You come up from the south to the north and work in the factories, and then now the factories are gone, so to speak. So that was the kind of narrative with the film, of the sculptures. But as I was describing them to multiple people, like when I made these things, I was describing this because my parents worked 5 days a week, and so they would so people would work on Friday, work all week, get paid on Friday, go to Bing's Furniture, buy furniture, bring it home, and set it up, in their house and stuff. And then basically my friends kept saying, well, you should be making films because what you're describing is time, like the physicality of time, so to speak. And then so with the strength of these pieces, I started being serious about the film practice, so to speak. And then also I got a job at University of Tennessee to start a film program and teach photography. So I think my pedagogy kind of informs my altruistic practice, so to speak. And then so I started making films about black migration, so to speak. So in this particular film, it's called Company Line. I'm going to show a small clip of that. And so I made a trilogy of films about the first 3 black neighborhoods in my hometown. The one was called Watchworks, where they were domestic workers. One was called the Camps, where they work at the steel mill. And then Company Line, where they also worked at the steel mill too, have as well. In these neighborhoods, the Company Line is not there anymore. So to tell the narrative of this migration, I used snowplow truck drivers. You go up north, there's city employees. Charlottesville, you get like a dust in the snow. They're closing the schools for a week, so to speak. But in Ohio, you have to, like people who work for the city employees, they have to kind of plow the streets. And so I thought there would be a best way to tell narratives about these neighborhoods that don't longer exist, who work in the streets. So I'm gonna show like a small clip of it. And then, so I was basically asking snowplow truck drivers where they were from and how they got there and when they got there and what kind of jobs they had, so to speak. So the viewer will get the narrative of where they're from, but also the narrative of where the jobs are, so to speak. So here's a small clip, and the film's like 30 minutes long. And then this is like salt on the road. It like didn't snow that winter, so I had to get a lot of salt. So my cousin worked there, so we were plowing in parking lots to kind of fake it. Plowing, yeah. So that's like a small clip from a Company Line. So Yeah, and then so I like to kind of prompt people about where they work, so like they can give this kind of narrative and also have the last name, because it's very like family oriented town, whatever, so to speak. And then so I like the fact, and I think today is maybe the 20th anniversary of the Gulf invasion of Iraq, I think, right? Something like that? Yeah. So a lot of the soldiers who went off into the war or whatever, they're from small towns that didn't have any jobs, and people had to join the military, so to speak. So his little narrative about what all the jobs he had and stuff, like, is indicative to what my hometown has become, so to speak. So anyway, so that was a way from going from those end tables about black migration, just by having the two photographs, by using time-based, like, the medium to talk about black migration too as well. And also too, I like to render like the weather too as well, because my family's from Mississippi, Columbus, Mississippi to be exact, and then the fact that it doesn't snow there, so that the two two effects of landscape and weather on a particular population, so to speak. In this particular film, it's called Erie, and I think it's on Criterion Channel or whatever. And then, so I started, and then for me, about those end tables, what was happening was, like the way I was describing, people work 5 days, and then, buying the furniture. But what got me to really making film was the fact that my parents physically looked different from Monday to Friday. And my mom cooked all the time. She was a good cook, and in fact, that was her nickname, Bake Girl. And then, so the whole idea of that, just that, the fact they would always come home with like Kentucky Fried Chicken on Friday or something like that, because they're just too tired to cook, too tired to do anything. And so the physicality of labor on the human body was the thing that I wanted to see how people changed. And even when I used to work in the factory, I remember going back to college from the factory, and then my friends saying that, man, your forearms are big. They would see how my body, how it would change your body, so to speak. And because now everybody's wear glasses now because of the computer and carpal tunnel, the whole idea of the physicality. And then so for me, it was the kind of whole idea of dirty time and the materials of film and sculpture and all that kind of stuff too as well. In this particular film, it's like 81 minutes long, but it's 8 10-minute long takes, unedited takes. So it's kind of like I showed the sculpture from Detroit, where you had the stumps and the paint cans. Whoops, excuse me. Yeah, like something. The paint cans. So Erie is a kind of a long, kind of 10-minute long takes, kind of a narrative from the South to Canada. For almost the Underground Railroad. It starts out with this billboard that I'll show in a few minutes, and then it was supposed to be about the auto workers. So I wanted to film in a factory, but I couldn't get permission. But I had 3 cousins. 2 had just retired on Friday, and I interviewed them on Sunday. And then they talked about working in the factories for 10 minutes. And then I was trying to think of a shot to come after that, and then I'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to show the end of one take, just where 2 factory workers. So each scene is unedited. So the viewer has to concentrate on something for 10 minutes, and then I want the people, the subject matter in the frame, to concentrate for 10 minutes on something. So I'm going to show this.
I actually talked to a guy Friday, and him and I were standing there talking, and he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm retired. He said, good for you. Because I have 15 years. I can't go nowhere. I can't retire. I can't take the road into. I can't take the research step. I can't stop. He said, am I angry? Yes, I am angry. Because I'm losing big time. I can't do anything.
And this is shot in 2009, and the GM factory closed summer 2010. Yeah.
But, even with my situation, I'm missing the future about 4 months. But, like I said, I'm not angry about it. I'm willing to go somewhere else, wherever they want to send
And that's the end of one take. And I like the materials of the film and the exposure, so to speak. Yeah. And then when this, and I was thinking about, and I was trying to think about what would make sense after factory workers talking about their job. And I said, oh, sword fighting. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But to me, it was just like the kind of theatrical of it, and also it was just the internalness of for me, I like to make films like an abstract, like kind of painter, where it's all self-referential. Like, the thing only happens within the structure of the film. And then, so I had these actors, like I shot this up in Buffalo. I went to, like Taming of the Shrew, what's the Shakespeare one? No, where they're on the island. Yeah. So I went to the Tempest on Monday, took those guys to lunch on Tuesday, hired a fight coach Wednesday, and filmed them on Friday. And then, so I remember the fight coach was like, so what kind of sword do you want them to use? I said the loudest, because I'm doing the sound thing. But also, too, swords are handmade. And so the whole idea of every time I see a General Motors car, I think of my cousin's DNA on it. So I was trying to think about what is the conceptual bridge to noise, audio, like gesture, and then what is handmade. And then, so like the whole idea of somebody making something, and then what the University of Virginia is all brick. It's kind of annoying because it's like a Jeffersonian fucking theme park sometimes, because folks tourists would come. Now, where's the rotunda? I was like, it's right there, because it looks like everything else on campus, whatever, so to speak. But for me, the brick is something that's put on by hand. Although Jefferson bought 6-year-olds to make the rotunda, and then he sold them and bought older kids to finish it, so to speak. So that tells you something about where I am, and also the history of what the United States, so to speak. But then the whole idea of what labor and what physicality is, so to speak. So that was that particular film. This particular film, as you can see, it's pretty short, like 8 hours long. It's called Park Lanes. And then for me, it's all about dirty time. So the fact that, I wanted to, one of my favorite artists is this guy named Lav Diaz. He's a Filipino filmmaker, crazy cat. And he's got these 9-hour long films and shit. It's like narrative, and if it takes 20 minutes for the oxen cart to come up the road, it takes 20 minutes for the oxen cart to come up the road. And then so I always would want to make something that I can kind of justify that length. And then so I just shot in this factory. I think sound's going to be kind of loud, I think. Yeah, I can't control the audio from here. I thought I can, yeah. So anyway, so I wanted to make a film, I wanted to use a big ticket item, but I ended up using I'll wait till this guy John Payne. I can't control the volume. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to film. I wanted to film a big ticket item, like a car, or maybe like a washing machine or a refrigerator. But I couldn't get permission to shoot in a factory like that, so I ended up shooting in Mechanicsville, Virginia, where they make bowling alley supply, so to speak. And then, so when I was framing up, I was trying to figure out what kind of narrative I wanted to make, instead of the the assembly line. And then I started filming things that look like kind of sculptural objects, so so to speak, like this kind of art object. So I shot 3 days in this factory and just kind of tossed it together to make this kind of 8-hour film, whatever, so to speak. And again, I should talk about the materials. But this particular film is HD. The last film was 16 millimeter. Company line was 16 millimeter, standard def, and still photography. Yeah. So I could use kind of multiple materials in one film, so to speak. Yeah. And then I usually get these HD cameras and put shitty lenses on them, like these C-mount lenses on them, so I can have this kind of texture to them, so to speak. Yeah. I use I think this is Black Magic, and then I think I had the first iteration of the digital Bolex when that came out. That thing's a mess, yeah. So anyway, but this is Park Lanes. And and I like this whole idea of these kind of long takes, whatever. And like I said, Erie was like 8-10-minute long takes, because that's the maximum length of a 400-foot magazine, or 133 meters, like a magazine. And this particular film is it's called Tonsley Park, and it's basically 8-10-minute takes of African-American election officials during the 2016 election. I think when I went to the primaries in 2016, I got there super late, and I realized, oh man, I could make this like a 13-hour film, the length of the voting thing. But then I decided to do like long takes of it. And so what I'm doing is, like, I like the material. So I do have bigger films that need crew and stuff. But I think it was about me and a few other folks. I like the fact that just a painter goes out with their easel, canvas, brushes, and paints. I like to go out with like a tripod, camera, lenses, and film stock. So I'm treating it the same way as a painter, so to speak. In this particular film, it's all, and then I try to find a kind of formal quality that goes through all of the films. And then, growing up, going to school in the 80s, my professors were with the school in the 70s. So they were all into the whole idea of the kind of minimalist materials, process, and procedure. The work had to exhibit all those three things. And so I still do that. For me, formally, the materials are part of the content. So the whole idea of this being a 10-minute long take, it's the maximum take of the film magazine, so to speak. But in this particular film, because I couldn't record them talking because they were giving out addresses and names, so the sound person is somewhere in the room, and I'm using the telephoto lens to flatten up the space. So what I'm doing is I'm changing. I like the strategy of this film was to kind of change the subject matter. So the subject matter would be swallowed up by the depth of field and be surrounded by humanity and like voters, so to speak. So then it was almost like a kind of a flicker film in a weird way. It was just where it was just all this was kind of happening, and it was kind of claustrophobic. So every time, just when I make a film, I try to find a kind of a formal quality to kind of express it. And also too, it's kind of like the Richard Pryor joke, because I said that he would make the minor character, major. And then for me, the minor character is people go to vote, but they don't realize the labor and the people who set up the voting, who keep democracy alive. And you'd be surprised, it's a lot of African Americans where democracy doesn't really work for us, but we do keep it. We're civil servants. Like any state capital will have a higher population of Black Americans as opposed to the national average, so to speak, because the private sector never hired blacks, but the public sector did. So then the whole idea of keeping democracy alive, and having these people working the kind of voting kind of thing was something that was really important. So I like to make the minor figure major, and also make the invisible visible, so to speak, whatever, just by kind of subject matter. And then also too, I'm thinking like kind of formally, I'm thinking like a painter too as well. This particular film, I'm going to just play it. Yeah. Is basically shot in my parents' hometown, Columbus, Mississippi, and I remember in always would use like old photographs and stuff. So I was asking my aunt, like, where are the old photographs and family heirlooms? Oh, we lost them in the 1973 flood, so to speak. So I made this film based on the 1973 flood of Columbus, Mississippi. It's the Tom Bigby River. And what they did, they dredged the river, so it creates this kind of fictional island. So you see this kind of, like, we had to train this guy to water ski, because we couldn't find a black water skier, so he's a drummer. And that guy couldn't walk for days after he was water skiing. So that's the first time he's ever been up on water skis. But I'm using the two-dimensional art practice where it's the figure-ground relationship. It's not about him, but it's a way to mark the landscape. So it's all about the dredging. So in the film, throughout the film, we kind of go all around the dredging, this kind of fictional island, Island St. Matthews. And so I figured I just couldn't just film it from the boat. I usually like to have a figure there. And for me, like, the subject matter is the landscape, not the figure. But it's a way of kind of getting rid of the kind of foreground of like the boat, and then so it's him and the landscape, so to speak. So I do this a lot, to kind of playing with the figure ground relationship. So I still, like, even though I'm doing filmmaking, stuff like that, and then I like filmmaking being taught in the art department because you can use these kind of formal, artistic kind of practices, like I said, of script writing, although I do some of that too as well. Don't really like script writing, so to speak, because it kind of locks you down. But then, you know, so this particular guy is like I was hoping he would stand up through the whole thing, but he kept falling down. So you're going to see him fall down in a second. Whatever. So it's basically like that's the subject matter, and then he just kind of comes in and out of it, whatever. And then I think this happens like maybe three or four times within the film, whatever that we go around. But every time I see this, I think about his legs. He just like we had to hire a professional water skier to get I was a little nervous at it. I didn't kind of just get the guy up and he thinks about it. And here's another film I did a couple of years ago. I was trying to they were in the pandemic, trying to film about summer, and then this film's called May, June, and July, and the May part is like peonies, flowers. The June part is fireflies, and I was thinking of like July. And then for me, I hired a roller skater to skate on the Black Lives Matter plaza in Washington, D.C. So it's basically, again, the landscape. But I need a figure there that kind of masks the kind of back and forth. So to speak, whatever. So I'm still playing with the whole idea of the kind of figure ground relationships. Whenever. And actually, I'm on rollerblades, which is the first time in 20 years I was on rollerblades. And the whole idea was to kind of to roller skate around the Black Lives Matter plaza, but the road was too rough, so we kind of stayed in one particular area, so to speak. So that's that particular film. And then also, I have like multiple bodies of work. I make films about re-representation of objects and elements from my hometown of Mansfield, Ohio. This is a still from a film called Richland Blue. We have, in the past, we had this very corrupt police force there that would make stag films. Anybody know what a stag film is? Stag film is an old school porn film. This is Mary Baldwin, right? Anyway, to have like bachelor parties and bachelorette parties, like have like dancers or strippers. That's a new thing. Prior to that, it was like stag films. I'm trying to say it in a PG manner or whatever. But anyway, like stag films, whatever. So anyway, the police made these corrupt stag films, and then my hometown's very corrupt. And there's 3 dead bodies around these films. I'm trying to get these films, but this guy has them. But also, they made a film. They caught. I think they got a black female shoplifting, and then also they made her star in her own PSA about it too as well. So it's just like super corrupt. So anyways, I made a film based on those films. This film's called IFO, Identified Flying Object. The most credible UFO sighting in the United States is over my hometown, called the Coin Incident. You're shaking your head. Do you know about that incident? Yeah. Yeah, my uncles and them say that it was like, because the reason why they think it's kind of creditable, because the helicopter rised up to chase the thing, and they burned all this fuel. if you ask my uncles, them, they said they picked up hookers in Indianapolis and made this story up. But anyway, apparently it's supposed to be the most credible, like, flying saucer, like, encounter in the history of the United States. So those are my hometown. But the film I made is also about the black griot, the black storytelling, too, as well. Round 7, it's based on, there was this fighter, Art McKnight, used to live in my hometown. He had a famous fight with Sugar Ray Leonard, one of the best kind of boxers, in 1978 after the 76 Olympic Games. The fight was called because he was winning because they wanted to protect Sugar Ray Leonard. So I made a film based on that particular, and it was the fight was in Dayton, Ohio. So I made a film based on that. My uncle had a gospel group. And it's the film based on the recordings of that group. And recently I've been making films. This is an unfinished film about the prison in my hometown. And I'm doing this thing where, like, if you use high contrast film and it's in the right side of the frame, the lines would make a soundtrack, so to speak. So it makes these kind of sounds, so to speak. Then I have another practice where it would just, is I still make sculpture objects and props for the film. But this film's about a funeral home. I grew up next to a funeral home, and so we made this kind of funerary headrest for it. This is a scene from Erie, the film that showed what the factory employees and the sport fighters. The first scene of the film is this fictional billboard that was up in Angola, New York for 4 weeks. There was never a Volkswagen factory in my hometown, but we made this. But back in the 40s and 50s, what they used to have billboards in the South to advertise blacks to move up north. And so we made this, so like that's my uncle in the military in the 60s. So we just made this fictional Volkswagen billboard, and then now it's like in galleries, so to speak. I made a film about scrappers. You guys know about these cats who steal, and I hired these 2 actors who were in another film of mine who were actually scrappers at one point. So the film was fictional, but then it became a documentary, like overnight, whatever. So anyway, but I made the tools to extract the things too as well. I like to make the things because it gives me a chance to think about the physicality of what's about to happen. I like to make the objects. Well, this is the Island of St. Matthews, the film with the water skier. I made the bell. My granddad started this church, St. Matthew's Church, and then they couldn't get the bell to ring, so I bronze cast the bell. Oh, yeah, the headrest in 6 positions is rubber. What else did I show? Oh, shit. Yeah, that's just billboard material, print. That's corrugated steel, wood and bronze. And then, yeah, I'm going, oh, yeah. And then that's a bronze bell. And so the bell was always rang. And like in the film, I think you heard the bell ring, but it's for church service, Sunday school, like actually warning for bad weather, a death in the community. So there, and I forgot the other reasons why. So the bell was always rung, so to speak. It's like kind of like Catholic what communities in Spain, they usually run bells for that reason. And then I had these binoculars. I used to work in a Westinghouse factory, but during World War II, they made binoculars for the World War II effort. So I made these bronze and rubber cast binoculars. So every time I go to a different state, I usually have either kinfolks or strangers bird watch. And then that's Ohio, Brown Thatcher's Georgia, that's Texas, and that's Mississippi. And then also, you saw the bell and stuff that functional. So now, like the binoculars don't function, and then they made irons in this Westinghouse factory. So I made these unfunctional, like irons, so to speak, for a film. And then I made there was meat tenderizers that were made in my hometown. So I buy these things off of eBay and like cast them. So I know there's a whole practice of found object and this stuff. I used to do that, but I like to make the thing. I like the whole idea of like sculpting the thing and seeing the kind of model, so to speak. And then there was tires that were made in my hometown. So these are cast rubber tires. And they weigh about 75 pounds each, whatever, so to speak. And this is something I just finished the other day. I just found out that my granddad in Mississippi had to quit school at 10 to work in the place to make railroad ties. And the place was called Box Mill. So I bought a railroad tie, made a mold for it, and cast it in rubber. And we just pulled it out of the mold a couple weeks ago, and then I just cleaned it up Friday, actually, just for this presentation, whatever. Yeah. So, and these things may function in the film or not, but again, I like making these things that have this kind of history, so to speak. But they have a practice of film that is for archive film making. I like found footage stuff, and I'm going to show you like a scene from. And then this particular film is called Emergency Needs. And so I think I got commissioned to make a film based on Gus Van Sant's films, American filmmaker. And he has 3 films that are about people know what happened, don't really know what happened. I think one of them is Elephant, is that it? About kind of Columbine. The other one is Jerry, where 2 people go off to the desert. And the other one is the Kurt Cobain one. I can't think of the name of that. Was it? Yeah. Last Day. So I made a film based, called Emergency Needs. And then I used to live in Cleveland. I'm from Mansfield. I used to live in Cleveland. And Cleveland, Ohio, had the first African American city. The first African mayor of a major metropolitan city was Carl B. Stokes in Cleveland, Ohio. He was elected in '67 based on the Huff riots in 1960. And then Cleveland was the only city that didn't burn down when Martin Luther King was murdered and during the Rodney King uprising. But it did burn months later in this thing called the Cleveland Shootout, whereas one of the few uprisings where more cops died than blacks. And what the cops were doing were riding around indiscriminately shooting African Americans. And so the film is based on Carl B. Stokes' found footage of him and his performance of trying to, talk about what's going on. So I like his performance. So what I did was I hired actors to kind of mimic his performance. So here's like a few clips from the beginning of this film. How are we doing on time? No, I got a few more things to show. And my camera died here, but I used the footage anyway. And then I got the footage from University Heights. Baldwin. What's the school in University Heights? John Carroll. Sorry. So he's got to deal with this kind of hostile white press at the time. Yeah, so that's a parts of the like emergency needs, and then the film's like 7 minutes long. But then what they had to do is what they had to prohibit. They stopped letting white police officers and state troopers and National Guards go into black neighborhoods because they were just shooting people. So they had to have black, like National Guard troopers, stuff like that. So but the uprising in '66. Mayor Locher was actually wanted to shoot people who didn't go home, who passed curfew, so to speak. So it was this kind of big thing about that in the 60s, whatever. But so anyway, then I had this like practice of like found footage you saw, and then so I have a colleague of mine, Professor Claudrena, who's probably one of the smartest people, is the smartest person at the University of Virginia. She teaches African American studies and history and labor history. And then she started digging in the archives about the history of African Americans at the University of Virginia and black studies. So speaking, that's Vivian Gordon, who started the black studies. I don't know if anybody knows anything about African American history, but that's Julian Bond, the civil rights activist, and he was a colleague of mine. He was in the history department before he passed away. And so we started making these films about things that are going, about the history of blacks in the University of Virginia, but we were using, like our template, like I said, the scripts, we were using, like photographs and audio recordings and stuff. So right now we have like probably over an hour and a half of these films. I'm going to show, so you saw the photograph of African Americans playing foosball, which is probably the only time in history since 1839, the picture of African Americans playing foosball. And you also saw this kind of cocktail party. So we would cast by afros, who had afros, who had the 60s hair reduced, and then we casted, there's actors like Aaron Stewart to play Vivian Gordon to give a speech, and she was in some of my films prior to that. So we have this film that's based on Vivian Gordon. Then we have this film based on James Roebuck called We the Man. He was the first African American to get a PhD. And him and the president of the university, I can't think of his name now. President of the University at the time, Virginia. But anyway, they drafted a note to Congress in protest of the Vietnam War. This film's based on James Merritt, who was the first African American scholarship athlete in the University of Virginia, called Fastest Man in the state. The African American students picked up Sly Stone. I don't even know him as an old school soul singer. From the airport, we kind of reenacted that from a film. There's an area called the Black Bus Stop where we had this fictional African American step show going on there. There was a famous gospel group at the university called Black Voices, and then they did this concert in Hampton, Virginia. And so we made this kind of magical realism kind of gospel film. And there was a newspaper at the time called Pride, so we made a film based on that. And made a film actually about black hospital employees, and we shot in this, that they used to hang out in the speakeasy south of town called Gospel Hill, which was the neighborhood where the hospital was built on. And then we just found the first scholastic female black athlete at the university, Paulette Morant. So we made a film called Accidental White Athletes. We shot this last year because there was a set of twins, the Barnett twins. Like one of them was on the rowing team and the other one was on the lacrosse team. And then we just finished, and we just shot a film last Thursday based on African American fashions from 1970s, 80s, and then they walk into this 90s house party. So we're still making these kind of projects, whatever. And real quick, then also have another practice of projection films. So a lot of my films play in galleries. Like Park Lanes was actually, the 8-hour film was actually for the theater, but now it's playing in galleries now. But if I make a film for the gallery, the subject matter dictates the light and like how the space is going to be defined. So here in 93, my daughter's great-grandfather blows out 93 candles, so it makes the gallery dark. I rigged up my camera, my 60mm movie camera, to the University of Virginia telescope. So I filmed the moon. So one shot of the moon, it goes from space to moon, and the other one goes from moon to space. So it dictates the light with the gallery. And so I am officially an eclipse whore. Whenever there's eclipse on planet Earth, I'll go to it. So went to Chile to film Condor, and this was shot in North Carolina, like Poly, and then the eclipse is happening in 2024, next April. So I'm gonna have crews in 3 time zones filming the eclipse. But anyway, so they make the gallery dark and light too as well. And then this is I shot. You saw the island, parts of island St. Matthews. They built a lock and dam called the Stennis Lock and Dam, Columbus, Mississippi. So I liked the lock and dam, so I went to Panama and shot the lock and dam. So then, so the lock and dam doors kind of like they'll dictate the light of the gallery. And now I'm doing sound, so to speak. So this is a film about Opel cars, and then on one side it's in French, and the other side it's in one side it's in Spanish, the other side's in German, because it's based on when I was in high school. The military recruiters would tell us that it was cheaper to buy cars in South Korea, West Germany at the time, and in Panama, and ship them back. So some of my friends actually shipped cars back when they joined the Army, stuff like that. And in this particular film called Hazel, I don't know if you guys, again, the problem with Funkadelic, Eddie Hazel was one of the greatest guitarists of all times, and he has a 10-minute solo called Maggot Brain. So on one side is the rhythm section, and then the other side of the gallery is the expressive 10-minute guitar solo, whatever. So again, an actor friend of mine trained him. He took 6 months of guitar lessons to play that. And then somebody said, Ollie said she likes Century. So I have a whole series of car crushing films, so to speak. So every time I go to a different city, I have people crush GM Motors, like General Motors cars, because in my hometown, it was a General Motors stamping plant where they would stamp door panels, roofs, trunks, so to speak. So then so in Century, they drop a 7-ton ball on the cars to flatten them, and then in Chevelle, they just kind of crush the cars slowly. So I have about 4 or 5 of these films, whatever. And then this is the last slide. This is my friend Dominique passed away. He was the one that got me into making films back in the day. And so this is Khalil Pedasai. He helps me make films now. And so this was at the Lucasville prison, which is the longest prison uprising in history of the United States. And I like to show this film because you can't do things by yourself. You need a community and friends and stuff. So those of you making art. So it's always good to kind of surround yourself with talent and stuff because you'll never regret that. Surround with talent. All right, thank you. So I think it's a solid hour. Is there any comments and questions? Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yeah.
I think the conversation right now with artists is they're very fearful with the rise of AI artists and the fear that either that will make artists obsolete or that it can completely circumvent copyright. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is that not something you worry about?
No, I just the first time. Now I'm worried now, thank you. No. What? I think, no, what was those NFT, what the hell what was the things that were out? NFT? Yeah, I mean, that didn't last long. Like the market crash on that, I think. Not really. What was, there was this, like, I remember they had these 360-degree cameras, and some people were like, think that's going to revolutionize. But, but for photo and film, I still believe in the frame. Like, for me, what's important is what you don't see. I remember people doing all these 3D things, I know there's the augment reality, AR? Yeah, there's VR and there's augment reality. Yeah, VR. And those things are fun. I've seen the one, was it Guillermo Torres made the film where, like a VR one, just where you got the headset on, and then you're in the desert, and then border guards, United States come and scream at you, and so people are like really scared. So like, yeah, I mean, huh? Did we see that piece? Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so those kind of, I mean, but as for toes to AI, I mean, I don't even know what that is. I mean, the thing is, because art's got value, I guess, so to speak, and I mean, still paintings. I mean, like most of my friends who aren't painters, they're making paintings so they can sell. Because they know, because people still want that individual thing. So I'd be nice for an AI to, because this shit's expensive. I've read somebody to make this shit for me, whatever, so I can just watch the game or something. So I'm doing things like that. But I mean, I don't have any fear or anything about that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How do you decide when you're making films, like whether you're going to interact with people or not? Because like in the voter one, you were like very not much interacting at all, and then in the one with the truck drivers,
Yeah.
snowplow drivers, you were kind of prompting them to speak. How do you decide?
I guess it depends. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess it depends on the piece, whatever. I remember I started making the car crushing films because I got tired of because a lot of moving pieces and parts with films. You got to get permission and get people to do stuff, and I started to making films without any people. During COVID, I was shooting fireflies. Man, that was an 18-night shoot. It was crazy because fireflies don't cooperate. I was like, that was crazy, but we had a good time. But like COVID kind of protocol. I think for me it depends on if I'm tired of people, then I start making things without people. I think this depends on the subject matter I'm working on. Yeah, I guess it depends. I think this summer I'm not using people for some reason, and I don't know why. Oh, because I'm doing this kind of sound thing, like provisional sound pieces and stuff. So I don't need people. I may have some people, but I mean, I think it depends on where I'm at, and then the formal qualities I want to exercise that particular year. But I do like most people I use are like family members and friends because I know I can get them to do stuff, and a lot of people. But I do like approaching strangers and I like saying, hey, I'm making art. This is what I'm gonna do. But I tell them I'm going to use a voiceover on top of you, or use a voice or music. I'm always upfront about where this object is going to go, so to speak. So, and then also so that kind of thing. But I think it just depends on the kind of formal quality. I think for a while I was just tired of people. And then the period piece things that we do with my colleague, we just had we had a house party, but we had students for 20 minutes and half an hour, and it's kind of tough just to kind of get people together. And then we use the drama department to use their clothes and stuff, and so there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. And then I would rather, like I said, just use the tripod, the lens, the camera, and the film stocks as I'd rather go out myself and film, whatever, so to speak, instead of just using all this kind of muscle, so to speak. Yeah. So I guess it depends. I go back and forth, whatever, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody? I hope I answered your question. Hope I answered it. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to your desire to
Sculpture.
Yeah. I mean, curious about the significance of a choice of the past material. Rubber,
Yeah.
you're using rubber a lot, and so especially with this most recent piece with the railroad tie, why, probably, I guess I wanted to know more about why you're choosing that material to
Yeah.
create some of these objects, because, the way you're treating them on the surface, it's not totally obvious to the eye. So in terms of are you moving with them, or is that material?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly because I can make multiples. I bronze cast a lot, and then I can only make one, because of the mold or whatever. So I like to make multiples. But also, too, if I use the rubber material, except for that fucking railroad tie, I think it was huge and heavy and stupid. But, just I'm still injured from it from about a month ago. But the bronze cast, I need to get the sculpture department to do things and stuff. I had to wait till they bronze cast. But if I can do the cast in rubber, get this, I should be a product rep for Smooth On Company. I'm sure that guy's buying a boat every time because because every time he sees my 434 number pop up, he's like, oh yeah, I'm buying a new boat, you know, I'm spending so much money on those clowns. But anyway, but I like the fact that I can work on it myself, so I don't have to have the big crew. But also I can make multiples, like those irons, I made a bunch of those, and you know, stuff like that. But the bronze, now we've been doing the 3D printing now, and then we're using that instead of making wax, so to speak, so I can make kind of multiple things, whatever, so to speak. But I like making the multiples, whatever. So, and it's usually lighter, because people think that, like that railroad tie is actually bronze. It's like, no way. It's still like 200 pounds. The bronze would be like, you couldn't move it ever. So I think I just like the multiples of it and stuff as well. But again, still, but then again, it's about its wet materiality, so to speak, and then so the whole idea of it being that it's not what you think it is, and so I like that as a kind of a formal kind of quality to those things. Yeah. I have a bunch of products I got to make. I got a wrench, a brick, and some like a hair dryer. I don't know what. I mean, like I had a student who was related to Telly Savalas. I was like, you should be making films about that. You know, I was like, and he like asked me, oh, you like need some subject matter. It's like, you're fucking related to Telly Savalas. He was this actor from the 70s. He's bald like me. He has the same hairstyle like I got. So I was like, I can't believe that kind of stuff. You know, but I'm like barely, no connection at all to these things. I'm still cranking them out. But anyway, but I think I kind of like this whole idea of kind of, I still like kind of making things. I like the kind of studio practice, and sometimes film doesn't allow me because I come from that, whatever, so to speak, you know. I mean, I'm part of the WGA, like the script writing thing. I've written scripts. I mean, I think, I like making these, like, for me, it's equal from making a feature-length film to a 2-minute film. I spend enough time and thought on it. But when you do script writing and I think I think when you ask for permission, I think when you ask for money to make things, well, you're asking for permission. May I please? And I just can't imagine being a painter, like, may I please make paintings? But film somehow or another kind of falls underneath this. My daughter goes to Syracuse and she's doing film, and then it just drives me, and then half the time her class is zooming in with my class, whatever. Like during COVID they were doing that, so during the height of it. And then so the whole idea of like they have to make these kind of narrative things, which is fine, I think, but the resources to make these narrative films are incredible. I got friends in Cleveland trying to make these like cop films, but if it doesn't look like Law and Order, it doesn't, like it doesn't have the language. It has to look like a certain, because all the stuff is language, like all the materials, even where you film things, and HD and mini DV and film and 35 mil, it's all kind of, for me, and same thing as bronze and rubber and wood. It's all language, so to speak, and it's all part of its content. And then once you start making these kind of narrative films, well, then you got to understand all these sophisticated materials that go into making the thing, so to speak. And some people just want to make and then when people start doing dialogue, then that's when interest in filmmaking kind of leaves, whatever, because it's just like talk, whatever. Like as opposed to the camera moving and doing things, so to speak. But for me, I like the material. What was the question? Materials, whatever, so to speak. But then I do like how these things. I do like kind of language of art, so to speak, and and then I've made a film about drag racing. And for me, the film was about abstract expressionist painting, because it was always like the layperson think it's easy, but all the sophisticated relationships that go into it. So always the subject matter of my films is actually comes down to art making, the whole idea of art making. Because I see art as a kind of a science in a weird way, and I like to kind of explore what these things say, so to speak. Whatever. Anybody else have any questions? I hope I answered your question. Yeah. Well, come on. Let me say. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where they could live. And I guess, so I'm interested, and I love hearing about the people of the light of the films, living in kind of spaces and how thinking about that as an immersive installation. But I guess some of the other ones that you
Oh, it
Like,
matters.
viewing on the phone versus maybe
Yeah, yeah.
on a flat screen or projection.
Yeah, well, some people now, I guess it's on like streaming platforms now. I could just deal with Criterion. And I had something with Fandor years ago, which I ain't seen a dime, but them motherfuckers, but that's all right. I'll catch up with them somehow, just when they're not looking. And Mubi too as well. So I guess people are looking at them. I guess you want like an audience no matter where you are, and then you want, like we call it like traffic, you want traffic, but for me, it's mostly video projection, because the monitors, because a lot of my films are 4:3 aspect ratio, and flat screens aren't, and it's just too much hardware hanging on the wall. So I just doesn't like to see the hardware that much. So I like video projection a lot. And then also another thing about like I'm in like the Whitney, what's the independent study program up in New York? Like they got a curatorial thing, and so I'm in some show there, and they can't figure out shit. It's like, I don't want to see the show, because I said, so what do you guys do with sound? Huh? And so I hate when the audio bleeds to the photographs, because audio is an art object, and then when it bleeds on the, so it gives the photographs in the other room a soundtrack, and that just drives me nuts. So a lot of my projection films are actually silent, like the moon things, except for the, kind of like the Hazel's audio and the car stuff. But most of the stuff is mostly silent, because in respect to how, like, I have a gallery of New York and stuff, and then I did, because I know they moved, like Andrew Cripp's gallery moved, so like I had to drive day after the Nazis like invaded the Capitol, so I was like looking for Nazis on the highway, but just so I can just figure out how the audio was going to sound in this place, because they didn't know. And then so I turned around and drove back to Virginia, and then so I knew exactly what to put in there, because of the audio, because some people don't think about audio, because that is an art object to sound to as well. So when I'm doing, so then that comes into play. And then, so now I do a lot of looping, like I have projectors that loop, so to speak. So a lot of the films, so then the audio of the projector is part of the piece, whatever, because it is the 60 millimeter, like it's the like physicality of the film. So I want that to be heard, and then like I want that to be a thing. So I don't mind that hardware, but I don't like the kind of monitor hardware. A lot of people do, and it works for a lot of people too as well, but not because a lot of my films, that the aspect ratio is 4:3 instead of 16:9, so it's just too much hardware. So viewing it is always it's always important. Like I just made a couple of projection films, like in the prison, shot some stuff, and then so I'm just working on the audio to it too as well. So it's totally important. Like Park Lanes, I remember when I first made it, the 8-hour film, was like, I thought I was going to just go into the gallery, and then, like the museum's open for 8 hours, the film was 8 hours long. But I remember just when I first started shooting it, I was like, oh no, this is totally theater. And then it's been in theaters for like years, and now it's been bought up by museums and played in galleries, and so now I'm fine with it. But it took me a while because I want people to kind of sit with it, so to speak. So, but for me, I don't care if people like sit for 20. I remember I played out in L.A., and then I had some ex-students, oh, Kevin, sorry, I only spent 4 hours. I'm like, fucking Lawrence said, Arabia is like 3.5. I mean, you went the full clip. I was like, oh, yeah. That's a long time to be sitting in there, right? But I can always tell, right, when I introduce the film, and I can look and say, that cat's going to be there all day. And sure enough, I'm right. Because they bring pillows and snacks and shit. They just camp out, and then so I got to take them out to dinner, like when the film ends, because I just feel grateful and flattered that they want to sit through this thing. It is watchable, in a Kevin Everson sort of sense, or whatever. But then like how they're projected and played, like I was on the phone with like how big is the projection, where's the sound, so I'm talking to people about that and stuff, and a lot of people are still projection. I mean, it's only it's barely 20 years old. I mean, I know that Paul Sherritt and those guys did all those films back in the 60s and 70s, But the video projection thing, it's barely 23, 24 years old. And then, like I remember going to the Venice Biennale in 2001, and I literally turned on films because they weren't working. Because it was like humid and like Venice and shit, like nothing worked. So like I'm on my knees, like trying to plug the thing in so I can see the Stan Douglas piece, whatever, so to speak. Just trying to get it to work, you know? But so it's barely a 20, you know, so for, for centuries you had dark objects on white walls, and now you have light objects on dark walls. And so, so it's kind of a new, still kind of a new art form. Yeah, so to speak, yeah. Anybody else? Anybody ask questions? Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Yeah,